Welcome back to Harbor. That was Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake yesterday summing up the state of the Republican Party after a week of legal troubles about the president. But as the New York Times pointed out today, and actually earlier this week, for those wondering if the latest disclosures from the Trump legal file are finally weighty enough to cause top congressional Republicans to break with the president, the answer is no. Well, that's sad. In an interview with the New York Times, Republican Senator Orrin Hatch said, 8 years ago to 10 years ago, Trump was not what I consider to be a pillar of virtue. I think he has changed a lot of his life once he was elected. I think Trump is a much better person today than he was then. Well, Senator Hatch told the Times that the president, quote, comes from a slam-bang, difficult world. It is amazing he is as good as he is. Let's bring, what a low bar. Let's bring in tonight's Hardball Roundtable. Aisha Moody Mills, a Democratic strategist. Evan Siegfried is a Republican strategist. And Gabe DiBenetti is a national correspondent for the New York Magazine. Thank you all. Assessment of the Republican Party. We've been looking at them. Are they breaking with him or holding with him? Aisha.
Well, the leadership has given their folks out in the field who have tough races permission to finally break with him, albeit delicately. So I think that what we're going to see come September, early parts of October, is more aggressive running away.
Evan?
Well, I think that they're going to stay right with him.
Is Trump a great president?
No.
Okay, good.
I mean, am I dating Jennifer Lawrence? Of course not.
Is he a good president?
No, he is not a good president whatsoever.
Did you vote for him?
Of course not.
Okay, I think you're a big Republican here. We're trying to balance this thing out, looking for somebody.
I'm just being honest. I'm one of the few in the party who's actually standing up and saying there's something wrong here with this guy.
Why do all the senators go along with him?
Because the base is absolutely in love with him. And same with the House. They are scared of the base. They are taking a very big calculation of, if we stand up and say something against President Trump, we are going to be taken out by the base in a primary. Look what happened to Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, and even Mark Sanford in South Carolina. So they're thinking, if we just keep our heads down, we can wait it out, Democrats will win and we'll be able to go through.
Let me get it straight while you bring up Mark Sanford. Look, I'm trying to give the guy credit. He fell in love with somebody when he was married. He shouldn't have, but he did. That's not, but Trump's behavior is not falling in love with somebody. I'm sorry. There's no romance with this guy. How do your party defend that and go after, they dump Sanford like a bad habit, and then your president gets away with everything?
Yeah, he does, because they won't hold him accountable. Devin Nunes is subservient to him. It seems he's going to the White House and saying, yes, sir, what can I do to help you? It's so frustrating as a Republican.
But you've touched on it. It's fear. But it's not necessarily fear that they're just going to lose. It's fear of the unknown, because he's so unpredictable. No one wants to get lashed out.
Are they afraid of a nickname?
They're absolutely afraid of a nickname. That's one of their greatest fears, which actually tells us quite a lot about the state of things right now. But we really have to stop every 2 weeks saying, is this going to be the thing that lets them break?
We have to.
But guys,
we can keep asking.
They're afraid of losing the House now. There's fear, but they're also afraid of losing the House. And I think they're getting hip to that, so they can worry about their base all they want, but in some of these districts, they got to worry about their
But you're missing one key thing, which is President Trump doesn't have the self-discipline to muzzle himself when Republican candidates go after him. And you saw last week, the Ohio 14th Congressional District, Dave Joyce ran an ad saying that he stood up to President Trump on certain issues.
And what happened to him?
And thankfully, they haven't said anything yet. But if you see anything else in these districts where there are Senate candidates going out and saying, hey, that Donald Trump, I'm going to be a check on him, he's not going to be able to contain himself. And with his stress level rising with this investigation.
The frenzy's there. What happened to profiles and courage? Anyway, meanwhile, California Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter, who was indicted this week along with his wife for misuse of more than $250,000 in campaign money, is now blaming his wife for saying he had nothing to do with it. Let's watch this gentleman.
When I went to Iraq in 2003, the first time, I gave her power of attorney, and she handled my finances throughout my entire military career, and that continued on when I got into Congress, because I'm gone 5 days a week, I'm home for 2. So, and she was also the campaign manager. So, whatever she did on that'll be looked at too, I'm sure. But I didn't do it.
Well, there's me too, and then there's not me. I mean, what is going on here? He's blaming her?
What a class act, right? There's no wonder that this guy was one of the first to hug Donald Trump. I mean, clearly he's disloyal, he's disgraceful, and now he's throwing his wife under the bus. I mean, how can you trust anyone like that?
He's
and are we supposed to believe that he didn't know he was
She's going to prison,
broke?
according to his testimony. She's the one working the checkbook. Evan, you're laughing. This is outrageous. Well, it's
from a PR perspective, it's a nightmare. From a legal perspective, I suspect that they the couple have separate attorneys. And this is a move of, it's not me, it's her. It's him trying to stay out of jail, and he's mounting
He'd probably
the
get
defense.
reelected, though, in that district. What do you think?
He very well could. He's still favored to by quite a large margin. There is a
So
promising
he gets
Democrat
reelected
there.
in the step 2 as they deal with the legal thing.
Well, that's right. But one of the things is that there's no real mechanism in California right now to get him off the ballot. So even if he's in jail, if this gets that far, he could still be reelected. But really, the lesson here is just how sad this is. And it does speak to just how corrupt a lot of these systems are. The fact that we could get this far and he could
We
be
have a lot of
spending his-
congressional districts which are rotten boroughs.
Yes.
You cannot be defeated in a general election. The only chance is in a primary to clean the house.
But what type of message does it send to women when we already have a problem as a party with women, and it's gotten even worse because of the Women's March and the organizing across the country?
Well, given that more than like
blame the wife.
55% of white women are still voting Republican, I would really ask the
And we're
party what's the
bleeding
deal
them in
with
the
their women.
suburbs.
I mean, it's interesting.
I think it gives new reference to the term prenup. Don't blame me. Anyway, the New York Times' Mark Landler writes, as Mr. Trump faces his own mushrooming legal troubles, he has taken to using a vocabulary that sounds uncannily like that of John Gotti and his fellow mobsters in the waning days of organized crime. Let's watch the president.
I've had many friends involved in this stuff. It's called flipping, and it almost ought to be illegal.
You took your first piss like a man, and you learned the 2 greatest things in life.
What? Look at me.
Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
He says in a tweet, the failing New York Times wrote a fake piece today implying that's because White House counsel Don McGahn was giving hours of testimony to the special counsel, he must be a John Dean type rat.
Come out and take it, you dirty yellow-bellied rat, or I'll give it to you through the door.
One of the reasons I respect Paul Manafort so much is he went through that trial. You know, they make up stories.
Unlike Cohen, he tweeted, Manafort refused to make up stories in order to get a deal.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Well, the patois of this president seems very much resonant there with that kind of mob movie.
Absolutely, but I don't think this is really a story about mob movies. I think it's a story about headlines in the New York City tabloids in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s when he was coming up in the New York business world, looking for his own name in the tabs and reading other people's names, and all about this mob stuff. This is a world that he did come up with. Not saying that he's directly connected with it, though there have been instances there that have been proven. But listen, this is a world that he knows, and this is the business world and the business lexicon that he came up with. He's not used to talking like a politician. Newsflash there.
My wife's from out California. She doesn't know this stuff. She grew up out there. And I was always read the Philadelphia Inquirer on Saturday just so I could get the latest on mob killings. Because the South Jersey mobs have repeated capo or this or all this lingo. You know, Joey 2 times, whatever, Jimmy 2 times. All these nicknames. It sounds like Trump talks in this guys and dolls language.
But here's the thing, is that it's not just how he sounds. He's not just talking the talk. Here's the thing, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And to your point
You think
about
he's a
all those
mobster?
reports,
What are you saying?
His entire career, there's a political article from 2016 about this, looking at his entire career. All of his real estate was built essentially by the mob. He has close ties with the leaders of the
Which
Genovese
mob? Be
family.
careful here.
With the Genovese family.
You got to slow down a way. Who are you saying what is your authority here? You're saying that he has gotten money from the Italian mob, the Sicilian mob?
I'm saying that the people that he has hired to lay his concrete and build his buildings, it has long been documented that these are folks who have been connected to the mob. And I'm telling you guys, pull up the political article.
I know it takes about 5% of a construction job to move something in New York. I've heard these things over the years. It takes a little bit of juice to move something. Go ahead.
There was an Atlantic piece yesterday that talked about Donald Trump and the mob, and what Sammy the Bull Gravano was quoted as saying was, I was the guy you had to run through for concrete and drywall. And I have stories to tell you about Donald Trump, the Cushmans, and this is the 80s, the 70s, when Donald Trump was coming up. And Donald Trump has made it known that he will work with some shady characters. So I'm sure that he was absolutely having to make deals with these guys.
It used to be ice, because you couldn't open up a restaurant if you didn't have ice in the old days before refrigeration. Mob controlled the ice. Now it's concrete.
But regardless of the actual individuals who are involved in this, we should look at the larger lesson here, which is really a question about how you do business and the way that you run an organization, whether it's the Trump organization or the White House. And very clearly the way that he talks about these things suggests that this is a very similar way to how some of these criminal organizations were run. And that is something that none
you're going to have some labor troubles
has said.
Well,
I'm not going to that.
Anyway, the roundtable's sticking with us. And up next, these three will tell me, I'm learning already something I don't know. You're watching Hardball. We're back with the Hardball Roundtable. Aisha, tell me something I don't know.
Well, Donald Trump.
Well,
right.
I've never heard anybody say well. Go ahead.
Well, right now, the Trump administration in the White House is holding up a bipartisan supported bill to deal with election meddling. And so instead of saying, well, we know that Russia was involved, we know that something nefarious was happening, let's figure out how to safeguard our actual election system before we go into the elections, the midterms, what they're doing is saying, we're going to wait till after the midterms to even think about it. And
why would anybody oppose stopping meddling?
That's a good question, Chris. I mean, that's the question we all continue to ask, is why is this president not more aggressively engaged?
But Republicans always want to make sure nobody cheats. That's their big thing. They assume a lot of minorities and everybody are all cheating in the big cities, and yet they don't care about the Russians. They just care about the big city ethics.
Things that make you go,
I make you Evan.
Well, foreign investors are not really investing in United States businesses right now. We've seen a decline since Trump took office. They're worried about Trump tweeting about them. Additionally, foreign investors are not buying U.S. treasuries because they are very concerned about the budget deficit and the expanding national debt.
What's the interest rate? 1?
But they really are concerned that the credit rating agencies are going to downgrade us from AAA to AA.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, here's something that I think you know about, but I think the vast majority of viewers and people in America may not know about, but they really should not treat this as a niche issue. This weekend in Chicago, leaders of the Democratic National Committee are meeting. Tomorrow morning, they're going to basically have to come to some sort of conclusion about the issue of superdelegates and what that means.
Who's going to win?
I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be less of an influence of superdelegates in the next presidential nomination.
Aren't they going to cut some kind of compromise?
They will, likely, and that's already where they are.
You know
now.
how I know that?
How do you know that?
My wife is chair of the Democratic Party of Maryland.
I knew that you knew about this.
Thank you so much. Yisha Moody Mills, Evan Siegfried, and Gabe DeBenedetti. When we return, let me finish tonight with my thoughts tonight on the great Senator John McCain. Please stick around for this. It's real. You're watching Hardball.